Hi, my name is Joseph Carmazingo, and today we're going to go over how to install Ubuntu Server 8.04 into VirtualBox, and then we're going to upgrade it, and then we're going to configure the BIND9 for basic configuration. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to want to create a new box. We're going to call it our Ubuntu Server. We want our type to be Linux and our version to be Ubuntu 64-bit. We're going to keep our memory the same. We're going to click on this one right here, create a virtual hard drive now. We're going to select this one up here, the VDI, VirtualBox disk image. We want it to dynamically allocate. It means it's going to, as we need memory, it's just going to fill it up. We're just going to keep this the same here. And there we go. So now we're going to go ahead and start our box. So now it's asking for our disk. What you need to do is you need to go onto Ubuntu, type into Google Ubuntu Server ISO, and you're going to be looking for the 8.04 version. So whenever you download that, then it's going to pop up right here as an option. So we're going to go ahead and click that, and we're going to start it up. Alright, I'm going to want English. You can choose whatever you want. Now I'm going to install Ubuntu Server. Some of this stuff is going to take a little longer than most, so we're going to use our US keyboard. Most of the stuff here is just personal preference. Alright, so this is very, very important. Make sure whenever you name what your host name is, make sure you write it down because we're going to need to use that later on when we're configuring our bind. So I'm just going to go with Ubuntu Server, and that's just what I'm going to call mine. You can call yours whatever you want, just make sure you write it down. I'm just going to go with Eastern. And when we're partitioning, I'm just going to use the entire disk. You can set it up however you want. Make sure whenever you're writing changes, yes, obviously if you agree to overwrite or write. Alright, so now we need to come up with some sort of user. This will be our root user to begin with. I'm just going to go with my first name, Joseph. You can create whatever you want, just make sure you remember it. Password, making sure it's something that you'll remember. We're just going to leave this blank. You can use it if you want, if you know how to, but for now we're just going to leave it blank. Of course, what we're working on here is installing the DNS server version of the software, so that's what we're going to choose to install. Alright, so the installation is complete. We just need to finish it up and we're in. Alright, so we're into our Ubuntu 8.04 server. So now the first thing we're going to do is use our username and password to log in. Alright, everything seems to be working fine. So now what we're going to do is we're going to use sudo nano etc apt sources dot list. Now what we're doing here is we're going to come in here, enter password. We're going to come in here and we're going to replace every occurrence of archive in this file. The reason being is because after old models are no longer supported by the newer archives, they're given to the EOL page, so we have to do the old release so that we can update it to our 10.04 server. So everywhere you see archive in here, we need to replace it with old release. It's going to take a little time, but it's not too bad. Can't forget these right here. I think there's a couple more right here, and then that should be it. Once we finish this, we'll just save it. That way, when we go to upgrade it, it'll use the old release.ubuntu.com and it'll find what we need to get to 10.04. Making sure didn't miss any. Aha, there's an A right there. Can't spell wrong or else it won't do anything at all. So alright. What about doing these right here? They're commented out. We don't need those for what we're doing. So you don't have to worry about those. And down here, everything's fine. So we're going to go ahead and Control X. We're going to save it. Enter. Alright, so we've fixed our sources list to give us our old release.com or .ubuntu.com. So now what we're going to do is we're going to sudo do dash release dash upgrade dash D. So that's going to start. It's going to check obviously for any upgrades, and of course we're going to have some. So it's going to upgrade it, which can take some time. It's going to analyze all the packages we need, and then it's going to ask you if you want to continue or not. Obviously you're going to click yes if you agree to the terms. And this can take a while, so I'm going to pause it in between and start the video back up whenever we get some sort of menu like we just did. So alright, so we've reached this menu here, or this stopping point. It's basically asking you if you want to update this specific file, and since we just downloaded it, I'm gonna go with the newer updated version. If you have some files that you did not want to change in this specific file, then you can say no, keep your older version. But for this, I'm gonna go with the new updated version. So if you want to do the same, just press Y. Alright, so now the upgrade is complete, so it's just asking us for the upgrade to take place. We need to restart the system, so that's what we're going to do. We're going to restart the system. just go ahead and log in using your username and your password from when we made before. So the last thing we're going to want to do as far as getting up to date on Ubuntu Server 10.04 is we're going to want to do a sudo apt-get, so sudo apt-get and update. This way it checks to see if anything's out of date in the 10.04 base upgrade that we just did. Alright, so now we have our Ubuntu Server 10.04 fully upgraded and fully updated. So now what we need to do is we're going to start working on the binds, or the BIND9. So the first thing we need to do is we need to install it. So we're going to do a sudo apt-get apt-get install BIND9. We're going to also install some other little tools just in case they're not included with the update, which sometimes it is. So let's see, -doc. So these other two we want just so we can test some other stuff if we wanted to. Alright, it's asking for the extra space. Alright, so now we've installed all of those. The next thing we need to do is start configuring the bind. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do some basic bind configuration. So we need to sudo nano etc/bind/named.conf.options. That's going to put us in that name.conf.options file, and the nano is going to allow us to edit inside it. Alright, so when we come down here to our forwarders, we're going to edit this. It's commented out right now. We're going to delete those so that we can see it, or that it'll run, more or less. So for our forwarders, for this one, I'm going to use Google's 8.8.8. If you have one that you would like to use, then by all means use it. But if not, you can use Google as well. So we're going to add those two pieces to our forwarders, and then we're going to save it. So Control X, Y, yes. So we've added that. So the next thing we need to do is we need to define the locations of the forward and reverse zones. Okay, so we're going to sudo nano /etc/bind/named.conf.local. Alright, so now that we're in here, what we need to do is we need to configure our zones. So our first zone is going to be our forward zone, and we're going to add this in here. Right here, whatever your host name was, this is where you need to add it. So for mine, it was Ubuntu Server. So that's what I'm going to add. Whatever yours was, put it right there. Our type is going to be master. The file we're going to use, which we're going to create later on, is going to be /etc/bind/db dot, and this is going to be your host. So whatever you put your host as, make sure you put it right here as well. Oop. I accidentally hit the wrong button. Get right out of that. Alright, so And that's it for that line and this zone. Okay, so we've finished our forward zone, the location for it. So now we need to do our second zone, which will be our reverse zone. So for this one, this is where whatever your IP address is that you're using for your internet, this is where it's going to go. Here. Whenever you're writing your IP address here, it is very important because we're using our reverse zone, and this is a reverse zone. We are going to put our IP address in reverse. So this is my IP address. It's going to be different from yours, or just a random IP address, more or less. For me, at least. Yours will be obviously completely different. So put that in. .in dash e or a rather ddr dot arp a in quotation marks and next line. So the type for this one is going to be master as well. Then we're going to notify no. And then we got to add our file in here that we're going to create also, as well as the other one. We'll work on that later on in the video. It's going to be put in the same kind of directory path. Right here, when we're creating our db dot something, what we're going to use is we're going to use the 10. For me, it's the very last one of the IP address that you can see on the screen now. So I'm going to put 10 here in quotation marks, and that's going to eventually be my file. Yours is going to be different. Just make sure it's very important. So now that we've finished editing our locations for our forward and reverse zones, we can go ahead and save it. So Control X, Y. Okay. So now that we have finished that, we need to start building our zones. So those two files that we just talked about, we're going to use a copy-paste method. That way we can use something that's already been built, but we're just going to modify it a little bit. So we're going to copy paste etc bind db.local, and we're going to copy that to this one, which is the one we were just talking about creating. For me, that's what I named mine. Yours is obviously again going to be different. So that copied the db.local to our db host name. So now what we need to do is we need to go in and edit the new forward zone. So what we're going to do is we're going to do sudo nano to edit /etc/ bind /db.ubuntu server. Yours is going to be different again. Alright, so now that we're in here, what we need to do is we need to come over here and edit what our local host is. This is what the name of our system is going to be. Just for this, I'm going to call it Ubuntu-server. And then you need to keep that period there in between, and then after that we're going to add our host name. So Ubuntu server was my host name. Yours is going to be different. Right here for our root, this is going to be the root, the person that you want all DNS stuff sent to. Whoever has root access. For me, I'm going to use my login, which was Joseph. Yours will be whatever it was. Just make sure that you remember it. For our locals here, we're going to do the same thing we did for the one above, I'm going to call it Ubuntu-server again, period, Ubuntu server. Alright, make sure we put periods at the end of these. It's very, very important. Alright, so now that we've finished that, we are going to come down here to the bottom, and we're going to add an A record to this forward zone. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to kind of comment right here and just say what it is. So we'll just say below are A record addresses. You can call it whatever you want. It's just basically helping us understand what's below. So for this, I'm going to use, if you had in your network map and you have a firewall connected to your DNS, or you're going to have one, this is where they'd go. We're going to call this one firewall. IN is going to stand for our data class, which is just internet. After that, we're going to label it A because it's an A record. Then here you would put the IP address of your firewall. For this one, I'm just going to come up with something. I'm just going to come up with something to use. I don't know. We'll just call it 1. If we wanted to add, let's say, a printer, then we could use this. We're going to use the same information as the other one, and we'll just go 69.96, and we'll just say 2, just to keep it pretty simple. Let's say if you had a server, a separate server you wanted to use, you could add that in here as well. And again, we'll just keep it simple. Just call it 3. And there we go. So we have 3 A record addresses now in our forward zone. So now what we need to do is save this file. So Control X, we're going to use Y to save, and yes, we want to keep it that. Alright, so now what we need to do is we need to create our reverse zone. So what we want to do is we're going to use sudo copy paste /etc /bind/ and we're going to use db.127, and that's going to copy and paste what already exists into our new one that we are going to create. And remember, this db.10 was whatever you created it in the locations file that we were editing earlier. So yeah, so that copied that there. So now what we need to do is we need to go in using nano to edit this file. Right. So now we're in this file. So now we're going to do, it's very similar to our forward zone in this part right here. So we're going to edit it, keep it all the same right here. Make sure you do not forget the period. We're going to use our root user. Down here, you can use the same thing as we did above. Period, Ubuntu server, period, make sure we have that. This last line right here was just copied over from the db.127 file. We don't need it for what we're going to be doing, so you can just delete that file. So now what we need to do is we need to add in our reverse lookups. So when we add in our reverse lookups here, we're going to use something similar to what we did on the other one, except right here, this is where your IP address, the last number in the IP address. So let's say for our firewall one, the last digit was 1. So we're going to use that. We're going to use our class internet IN. We're going to use PTR, and then we're going to name it firewall dot, and then we're going to put our host name here. So as you can see, the 1 is referring to the last digit that was in our IP address in our forward lookup, or our forward zone rather. Make sure we put a period here at the end too. And so that's for our firewall. So we're all good with our firewall. Now what we need to do is add our other one, which would be our printer. So we could throw in our 2 here because that was the last digit in the IP address. It's going to be the same class, PTR, and we're going to call it printer.ubuntu server, period. At our third one, make sure you organize everything right. And we're going to just use this one as we did before. Alright, so now that we've edited all that, that's our reverse. So we will save that. Say yes to keep the changes, and now the only thing left to do is to start our server. So sudo /etc/init.d/bind9 start. If all went well, it should say OK. And there we go. We have started our BIND9 domain name service. Thank you for watching. Again, my name is Joseph Connor Mozingo, and this is how to install an update in 8.04 and do basic bind configuration.